Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning!
That was a really desperate call, and I think we're going to need that level of desperation for this here. How's it going? I'm Austin. I am joined by the Show Me the Meaning dudes. We've got Raymond.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
And we've got Michael Burns.
Hey, hi!
Hey, hi. And this week we're going to be talking about, what do you call this? Is this a classic? The Charlie Kaufman, Spike Jonze classic, Being John Malkovich?
If this isn't a classic, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's definitely
true, but...
a mind-bendy investigation, that's for sure. And this was actually the patron-chosen film. So we put a poll out there on our Patreon, and we each selected 2 films, and we put it out to you all, and the votes came in, and it was a tight race. It was a really tight race. It was actually kind of the dark horse that came up in the final few minutes or whatever, and it beat out The Death of Stalin. So let's go over real quick what the results of the poll were. So Raymond chose The Babadook and Being John Malkovich, the winner. And I feel like The Babadook would be a good choice for a Halloween-y type of thing. So maybe at some point in the future.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Michael chose Death of Stalin and Dick Johnson is Dead.
Yes.
And I chose Enola Holmes and First Reformed. All right, so the final results came in. Being John Malkovich obviously won. Death of Stalin was very close in second. The Babadook was third. Enola Holmes was fourth. First Reformed was fifth. And I'm sorry, Michael, but Dick Johnson is Dead got no love whatsoever.
And you know what? I'm glad it didn't. I watched it last night. I think it would have been a weird hang. So things have worked out the way they are supposed to, I think.
Yeah, I wonder if we can get a little bit of a read on our patrons, on our followers by this. What does it say that the top 2 were Death of Stalin and Being John Malkovich? They're both, smart, quippy, kind of like analyses of culture and humanity and stuff like that. Maybe that just means that our peeps are super smart.
Yeah, they're both very wisecracky movies, if I can use that moniker or descriptor here, They both do interesting things with filmmaking. They both explore ideas at multiple levels. And they both have, some really classic character actor performances in them as well.
Yeah, totally. All right, so before we get into the recap, let's go around and just do first impressions. What was it like the first time you saw this film, if you can remember it? And then what was it like to revisit it? Let's start with Raymond.
Oh, sure. I'm a big fan of this movie. I think it's kind of one of those movies that's kind of the platonic ideal for a show like this that is both really entertaining and rich with a lot of philosophical subtext, and there's a whole lot to pick apart. And I think I saw this at first in high school when I went through sort of a Charlie Kaufman kick after first seeing Eternal Sunshine, and I checked this out, an adaptation, and there's really nobody else like him as a screenwriter. And I know y'all had the opportunity to talk about his most recent film, and Ryan and Jared weren't crazy about it, but it also is a pretty interesting picture, especially if you've read the book it's based on. It's beat for beat the plot of the book, but entirely different. And I think only Charlie Kaufman can do something like that. He can take something so weird as there's a portal to a guy's brain, and you may just be able to puppet him. And I'm going to make that not only an accessible film, but an immensely entertaining and enduring film. I think it's a testament to his singular talent that this movie is not only great, but even just basically watchable. It's such a weird premise. But I really dig it. I'm excited to talk about it.
Cool. What about you, Michael?
Well, first, I need to thank Raymond for acknowledging that I'm Thinking of Ending Things isn't a horrible movie. It was a rough episode for anyone who remembers. It was me on a tiny island by myself with Jared
on an
and Ryan.
ice floe.
Yes, they were shooting heat-seeking missiles towards me, trying to kill me the whole time, and I felt awkward being like, actually, I think it was good. But yeah, I really enjoyed this time around watching Being John Malkovich. Something that stands out to me, and I think this is similar to you, Raymond. I think the first Kaufman film I did see was Eternal Sunshine, then kind of went back to watch the others. I think the first time I saw this movie, I had no idea what the fuck was happening, but I liked it aesthetically, and it felt interesting. I was probably like in my early 20s, like college years, and I was like, I don't get this, but I feel like I want to get it, and I will get it someday. So I enjoyed it in kind of an experiential way. Now I think being a little bit older, it's great to see how different parts of the film can be like reanalyzed, and how you can focus on, I think, on certain things, on certain reviewing. So I found that kind of cool. There was stuff that was sticking out to me that didn't before. And I actually think one of the things that I never thought about too much before was how good John Malkovich's performance actually is.
He's so good.
He's great.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, because the whole conceit of the movie involves being inside his head, that sometimes you don't, at least for me, I don't focus enough on him as the actor in that movie playing this version of himself, and how in a sense that's like could be seen as harder than just playing some external character.
And to dovetail
and he's a very
that,
big actor too, right? So,
but he's also fucking great when he's playing John Cusack playing him. Like, there's a subtle distinction in his performance where he adopts some of John Cusack's. I think John Cusack's from Illinois. He has kind of a regional dialect a little bit. He adopts aspects of that and some of his mannerisms, and you feel as though he's really channeling a guy channeling him. There's so many layers to it. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good point. And like watching it, like those scenes after Cusack fully, moves into Malkovich, the movements, the dialect, it's so great. And even how he goes from exuding this like theatrical confidence to the puppet master insecurity of Cusack's character. It's just great.
There's a scene where when John Cusack is in control, where he kind of, and it's early on, and he's still getting the facility of Malkovich's body, where he comes in and he's just kind of slightly slumped over, and he just has that sort of like, kind of closed off hangdog expression, and that weird kind of manic energy that John Cusack has when he meets Catherine Keener in the bar, and he keeps saying, what's her name again?
Maxine.
Maxine, where he goes, "Hey, Maxine, how's it going, Maxine? Maxine." Like, there are these weird little ticks and eccentricities that Malkovich really nails. It's so good.
Yeah. So my experience the first time watching it was very similar to Michael's. I felt like I watched it and I thought that there was more going on. Like, I knew that I wasn't getting it all, but I enjoyed it. Even just getting into the story, it's kind of like batshit crazy, and the characters are great, and I think Cusack is great, and I actually completely forgot that Cameron Diaz is in this. Like, I completely forgot.
She
like,
kind of disappears, too.
Yeah, but like brunette Cameron Diaz, like I was like, what? I like, for some reason I thought the first thing she did was The Mask, where she's like the blonde bombshell or whatever, right? So I completely forgot. And then obviously Catherine Keener is great. Catherine Keener is great. But you know what's weird? So I've seen this a handful of times now, and I actually struggled watching it this time. And it wasn't because I don't think the film is interesting. I mean, the film is so interesting, but I think I got caught up in trying to like find what was interesting about it, you know?
Okay. Like,
rather than just enjoying the film. And I read a philosophical treatise on the film that I'll talk about probably at some point, but by a guy named Daniel Shaw, and it was a really interesting way to analyze the film, and I think that like screwed me up because I went into the film thinking about it too intellectually rather than watching it as a film. And I really think, even though it is a really super smart and philosophical film, I think that it's also a really enjoyable film, and I think I just lost a little bit of the enjoyment. So I think that's on me, and I would just tell people, if they're going to check out the film, like, don't try to overthink it. Just kind of immerse yourself in the craziness of what it is and let it wash over you, and then reflect on it afterwards with some friends while you're sitting around doing whatever it is that you do to chill, you know?
I think that's a good word of advice, because on this rewatch, I was able to kind of give myself over to it, especially knowing, like, you would be able to hold down the philosophical end of the discussion, and watching the movie and just, I remember a lot about it. I'm just turning it on to refresh myself. I forgot how funny it is.
It is funny.
There's just punchlines on punchlines and physical humor and all these weird absurdist touches when they get to the 7.5th floor, and just it's really fucking funny in ways that I had totally forgotten.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I think we often forget or don't even know that Kaufman started as a comedy writer. He worked on the Dana Carvey sketch show, and this is first screenplay.
That show was just a murderer's row.
It was incredible.
So
yeah, and he wrote this screenplay in between comedy writing gigs. So he was in that world and wanted to use this script just as like a spec to get comedy jobs. And I think this movie reminds you of how funny he is and that he does come from that world. Now he's grown increasingly darker and maybe even more self-serious in his recent films, but this is a funny movie.
Yeah. Well, this is a question that I'll just put it out now, and then we'll do the recap, and then let's get into it after. Right. Does he need a director? Does he need a Michel Gondry? Does he need a Spike Jonze? Does he need somebody to do the Eternal Sunshine, to do the Being John Malkovich? When he is in control, Anomalisa, Synecdoche, New York, his latest film, is there something...
and Spike Jonze did adaptation too, right?
Yeah.
Yes. If I have this correct. Okay, great. Sorry.
So is there something that he's almost a little too close to the material? I think that's something we could think about. Let's just put a button on it, and then I'll do the recap, and then
question.
we can maybe we can chat about that.
I've definitely got some thoughts on that.
All right, I have no idea how the fuck I'm going to do this recap, so
Best of luck, sir.
Let's see how this works.
Start at the beginning.
Okay. So Craig Schwartz is an unemployed master puppeteer in an unfulfilling marriage with his pet-obsessed wife, Lottie. Soon after he gets a job at Lester Corp on floor 7.5 of the Merton Flemmer building in New York City, he discovers a hidden portal that leads directly into the mind of renowned actor John Malkovich. The trip inside Malkovich's mind lets him see and feel the world from Malkovich's perspective for 15 minutes before being spit out into a ditch near the New Jersey Turnpike. When he tells his coworker and object of desire, Maxine, about the portal, they decide to start a business charging others $200 a pop to be able to experience Malkovich. Schwartz's wife, Lottie, however, becomes obsessed with the experience, allowing her to live out her transgender desires. One night at Schwartz's boss, Dr. Lester's house, Lottie finds a room dedicated to Malkovich. Later, while Lottie is inside Malkovich, he/they go on a date with Maxine, and Maxine falls in love with Malkovich, or with Lottie inside of him. In fact, when they have sex, Maxine repeatedly calls Malkovich Lottie. Now, Schwartz gets jealous, and he gets pissed, and he locks Lottie in a cage so that he can monopolize Malkovich's mind and date Maxine. While inside, he's a master puppeteer, so he begins to learn that he can actually take over Malkovich entirely. This makes Malkovich more and more paranoid, and after consulting his close friend, Charlie Sheen, he follows Maxine to floor 7.5, finds the portal, and insists that he enter the portal to his own mind. Once inside, he finds himself in a world where everyone looks like him and can only say Malkovich. After his own 15 minutes, he's spit out and demands that the portal be shut. Of course, Schwartz refuses. Lottie then escapes from the cage, tells Maxine that she hasn't been inside Malkovich, but that actually Maxine has been dating Schwartz Malkovich. But Maxine's enjoyed herself so much, she decides to just continue. Lottie then runs to Dr. Lester for help, and he reveals to her that he fully knows about the portal and that he's actually been using it to live on for years and years in other people's bodies, changing from one to the next as soon as the new body is ripe on the 44th birthday. The portal currently just happens to be linked to Malkovich, and Lester's plan has always been to wait until the right time to move into Malkovich's body. Then we fast forward 8 months, and Schwartz Malkovich has quit acting and become a famous puppeteer. He and Maxine are still together, and she's pregnant. But it's almost Malkovich's 44th birthday, so Lester, Lottie, and friends capture Maxine and demand that Schwartz leave Malkovich's body. He refuses. Lottie and Maxine then fall together into the Malkovich portal and travel through Malkovich's unconscious childhood memories before getting ejected in the New Jersey Turnpike ditch. Maxine then tells Lottie that she actually conceived her baby while Lottie, not Schwartz, was inside Malkovich. So Schwartz later decides, after a bar fight, to leave Malkovich voluntarily, and he ends up finding out that Lottie and Maxine have fallen in love. Meanwhile, Dr. Lester and his friends enter the portal just before the portal to Malkovich moves on to the next host. And despondent, Schwartz gets all ticked off after he's been ejected, and he decides to go back into the portal. But he ends up inside a different body, who happens to be Maxine and Lottie's daughter, Emily. He has no control, however, over Emily, but is forced to watch Maxine and Lottie live happily ever after through their daughter's eyes. And of course, the film closes with another appearance of an aged Charlie Sheen, with Dr. Lester/Malkovich telling him about the plan to prolong their lives through Emily. End of movie. But before we continue, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, Storyblocks. If you're a weekly listener, then you already know that Storyblocks is an awesome subscription service that gives you access to high-quality, royalty-free video, audio, and images. Once you download an asset, it's yours to keep for personal or commercial use. You can pick a subscription plan based on your needs, and the unlimited option provides you with access to everything, including templates for Adobe programs. If you head on over to Storyblocks now, you can check out their latest feature that comes as a part of the unlimited option, which is their video editing tool called Maker. Choosing the right asset can be difficult, and it can take up a lot of space to download all your options to try them out. So Maker allows creators to add text animations and transitions with a single click. You can upload your own footage, imagery, and audio to give different assets a test run. Maker even allows you to export your media at different aspect ratios, so you can post on whatever channel your business or project requires. So check out Storyblocks and their unlimited access plan today by going to storyblocks.com/wisecrack or by clicking the link in the show notes. Now back to the show. All right. So with that strange recap, what do we think here? Do you want to start off by chatting about, like, does he need a director? Is he kind of too clever for his own good? What's the deal here? What do we think?
Well, Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, my simple thoughts would be, I think he needs a director. I think all of his movies, I'll say this, all of his movies are good. I like all of his movies. I don't think Charlie Kaufman has made or written a film that sucks. I think that he is clearly an eccentric guy that has tons of ideas and lots of stuff he wants to cram into every film. And I think having a different personality like a Spike Jonze or Michel Gondry helps. And I think it especially helps that both Jonze and Gondry are a bit more playful. Both have been involved in like the world of making like music videos and stuff. So there's a playfulness.
Jackass? Wasn't Spike Jonze the Jackass dude?
Yeah.
He was part of that. He did a bunch of Beastie Boys videos, Bjork video, Fatboy Slim videos, tons of shit. But I think they bring a fun to the films that on his own he doesn't have. And like, I don't know, Synecdoche, New York, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things are great movies. They're not fun movies. To me, at least.
Sure. I think there's definitely... the humor is a lot more pronounced in something like this, or even adaptation, which is just... it goes completely off the rails. But if you... I remember hearing a story about Synecdoche, New York, which was... I'm pretty sure his first directorial effort. That was... He's only directed 3 movies, right?
Yep.
That, Anomalisa, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Yep.
And I heard a story that his first cut that he submitted to the studio of Synecdoche, New York was like 4.5 hours long.
Of course it was.
And they told him, hey, we can't release this. And he was just like, why not? And they said, well, we can't release a 4.5 hour long movie. And he's like, okay, how long of a movie can you release? And they're like, I don't know, like 2.5 hours. And he goes, okay. And then he just like dips, just cuts to, and it makes you think like anyone who can just up and cut 2 hours and then still have something that is rich and deep with all these ideas and mythology and characters as a movie like Synecdoche, New York is, to your point, Michael, I think his head is just brimming with creativity. That said, that is not an isolated incident. If you read early versions of Eternal Sunshine, the script goes past the point, and spoilers if you haven't seen Eternal Sunshine, but it goes past the point that it ends in the movie, and they keep meeting and deleting each other until they're in like their 80s and 90s. It's devastating.
Whoa.
And yeah, it keeps going and going and going until they've essentially just deleted every last brain cell where they could hide each other, and then they're just vegetables at the end, and it's fucking heartbreaking. So I do think he's always had this strain, this kind of darkness and this depth and gravity to his work. I think with something like this, maybe what you brought up, Michael, that this was supposed to be kind of a calling card for him to be able to write other movies. Maybe that being a little like 1 degree removed with regards to his intent, maybe he felt a little bit more freed to just be freewheeling, be a little bit more funny. He didn't feel like he had to make a point with every single line or every single scene. So I can see how his career progression maybe could have, ended up in a place where I think he's still making really good and interesting movies.
Yeah.
but there's a certain pressure on him now, perhaps, to make a Charlie Kaufman movie. And that has gotten refined and reduced to the meta aspects or the darkness or the explorations of grief and philosophy. And I think when maybe he feels kind of painted in a corner in that respect, but I mean, like I said earlier, when I turned on, or even when I first heard that he was attached to write and direct, I'm thinking of Ending Things, having read that book, and it's a fairly straightforward sort of horror thriller. It's extremely dread-inducing with regards to the atmosphere and stuff. You could make a straightforward adaptation of that, but when he was attached to it, I was like, "There's no fucking way he's making that book."
He did make a film called Adaptation about making an adaptation. Yeah, so that when he does an adaptation, it's different.
But he was hired to adapt the book that he's adapting in the movie adaptation. That was his adaptation of The Orchid Thief. Was like, he literally got hired to adapt The Orchid Thief, and he just said, fuck it, I can't do this. I'm just going to write a movie about trying to adapt this book. And that's the thing that's so, I think, inspired about him. And maybe it has a lot to do with the permissiveness of sort of mid-90s, early aughts film culture, that you could get away with really weird esoteric visions back then. But now, I mean, I'm grateful for every Charlie Kaufman movie we get, but they're fewer and further between because people just aren't willing to take those kind of risks anymore.
It's the good thing with the Netflix model, right? Like, I don't know if it's as freewheeling as it was maybe 4 years ago, but before, they were just basically giving creatives money, and there was no real oversight or checks or anything like that, like you get with larger production companies and studio projects and things like that. And Charlie Kaufman needs that, I think, right? And it's pretty freaking amazing. This was his first screenplay. This was his first feature. I mean, I'm sure he'd written a boatload before, but this is the first one that actually went into production and got made. For him to be able to make a film like this, where, I mean, there's a line in it where John Cusack, Schwartz is like talking about the metaphysical. He uses the words, the metaphysical and philosophical implications. Like, not many writers in general can get away with that, let alone a first-time screenwriter, Yeah. So it's amazing that he was able to get away with what he got away with.
And I think it's telling that this is something he wrote without the intention of getting it made. So maybe that allows you to say things in a script or try things when you know you're not going to be pitching it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I really
this is
like
something.
I really like what you said, Michael, about the fun element. I think that's it. I think that's exactly it. I think he's a very kind of almost morose, self-serious artist, tortured artist, right? Sort of thing. And I think that when he doesn't have that other person to kind of like pull back a little bit and add a little bit of levity, I think that's precisely what happens is he gets a little bogged down. Like Synecdoche, New York, I think is great, but I can totally see why it would be a turnoff to some people because it is just dire. And when Raymond says that the end of Eternal Sunshine was just, again, this sort of like dire, really dark, hopeless ending, I'm like, yeah, that's very Charlie Kaufman. But it took somebody else, like a Michel Gondry, to kind of lighten it up a little bit and add a little bit more of maybe almost a romanticism to it, which is much more of Gondry's style,
Well, can I ask you guys a question that goes with this then? How much do you think the John Cusack character is a representation of Kaufman's own like creative unconscious or creative anxiety?
I think that to a certain degree, obviously every character is an extension of the author. But you can't deny that there is this theme that runs straight through his work, that this tortured artist, whether they are a puppeteer or a screenwriter or a theatrical director in Synecdoche, New York, or his kind of preoccupation with theater, and I'm thinking of Ending Things. In Eternal Sunshine, people are sketching and coloring their hair. Like virtually everyone, or at least all of the main characters in his films, express themselves explicitly through art, and often through dialogue. They mention as much. So I'm certain that there's a whole lot of him and his nebbishiness and his anxiety that's imbued in the John Cusack character. But I think you could say the same for his version of John Malkovich, that he is this egotistical artist. I don't think it's any coincidence that when Malkovich goes into his own head, he's just surrounded by himself. He's constantly wrestling with the sort of ends of the artistic spectrum, whether it's someone who has absolutely no confidence and beats himself up, like Jim Carrey in Eternal Sunshine, his own facsimile and adaptation, or John Cusack in this, or in the same movies, John Malkovich in this, his fake brother in adaptation, who is just all expression and no edit button, or even Clementine in Eternal Sunshine, who is just pure expression and doesn't try to edit herself or anything like that. She doesn't apologize for who she is. I think you kind of see those poles in a lot of his work. Yeah,
there's definitely, I mean, I like you said, every single film is personal, but I feel like his films are almost too intensely personal sometimes, right? And it's an intense like exploration of his own insecurities and neuroses and things like that. And when I watch his films, there is a constant sense of discomfort that I get, where I'm like, dude, Kaufman, what's up with you, bro? Like, are you okay? What are you exploring? What's going on? And I think it's beautiful, but there is literally a sense where I feel like it's like, not to use like a cliche term, but it is like self-therapy. All of his films are,
Definitely.
When he's putting them out there. So
yeah, and I think like Raymond pointed this out about the Malkovich unconscious and like the narcissism there. But I think it's interesting to look at like three different things in relation. One would be, the Cusack character as the misunderstood artist who gets punched on the street for his puppet show because people are humping from other rooms. Then you have like then you have like the first level of Malkovich unconscious, which is the Malkovich world. Then you have the one that the Cameron Diaz and Catherine Keener character go into. That's the like deep unconscious of childhood trauma, abuse, being picked on, all these sorts of things. So this sort of like you have this sort of art coming from a place of trauma. You have the sort of narcissism necessary for an artist who believes their work deserves to be made, and then you have the like misunderstood Cusack character. And I like all of those as sort of like different slices of like the artist psychology.
Now, last episode that we did on Kaufman, there was some discussion about like that the film was kind of self-indulgent and self-aggrandizing. Do you think that there's something in that? Do you think there's something to that with Kaufman's output more generally? That doing this type of investigation, this type of, I don't know, airing out his own neurotic dirty laundry and exploring the deep recesses of the causes of being a tortured artist, is there something that's like a little bit self-aggrandizing?
Well, I think that art, at least insofar as it's commodified, is inherently egotistical in a way, because there's this tacit acknowledgement that like I think the contents of my brain are worth the contents of your wallet. So you can't really escape that. And I do understand some criticism that people could have of him that maybe his work is too personal, but if it's as entertaining as this, it doesn't really concern me too much where it comes from. I think that he writes these and these pieces are cathartic for him in a way that art is cathartic for a lot of artists. And if it helps him and it's appealing and entertaining and engaging for the audience, I mean, clearly this movie has had an impact because, 20 years later or 25 or 26 years later now, it still is, I mean, it's giving us a lot to talk about. There's a whole lot to unpack with it.
Yeah, I kind of, with that question that you asked, and I really love your answer to that as well, Raymond, about, is it too personal? Is it too self-indulgent? I don't know. It makes me think of music. Like, I would never complain if Bruce Springsteen got too self-indulgent and personal on an album or something, right? If anything, I would argue that, like, for, let's say, like a Springsteen or a Dylan or like a Dolly Parton or whoever, their best work is their most personal, introspective work. And in
what
my
about
mind,
Kanye?
like,
his work is pretty introspective and self-indulgent.
Well, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole.
This is a totally different tangent. Yeah.
I think all of his good work is written by other people, and all his shitty work is when he does that. But no one get mad at me. Delete that. Cut it. But I think like I think when we apply that standard to a filmmaker, it's sort of like why wouldn't I want that? There's a million filmmakers that want to make a movie for us that just tries to like tick boxes or like follow their screenwriting textbook to a T. And And, Kaufman in adaptation does make fun of screenwriting teachers and textbooks.
Yeah, the save the cat model and shit like that.
But I don't know. I think when you have something to say and you have a weird and interesting mind like his, go for it, man. Be a narcissistic artist and self-involved in that way. I dig it.
Yeah. I agree.
The other thing too is
I like
ahead.
when an artist has license, right, to be irresponsible. I like when we give the artist the kind of keys to the city, and we entrust them to challenge us. Obviously, I think there is a social and ethical responsibility to especially popular media, mediatized art. But nevertheless, I enjoy those spaces where someone who is truly talented enough is able to kind of buck the trends, so to speak.
Yeah, and the other thing, just to dovetail off of what you guys have been saying, is I kind of lost my train of thought. But his work being personal. What I was going to say is it is weird and esoteric, but it still fits within the framework of a studio film. It's structured and paced appropriately. It keeps your attention. It's snappy dialogue. Like, you can really explore a lot of weird things if you package them in a recognizable format. And I think a lot of folks underestimate audiences, especially young audiences and modern audiences. We underestimate their attention spans, and we underestimate their interest in weird and esoteric things. I think that if you're willing to make your personal message or your statement fit within the confines of a marketable film, which I think this one, despite how convoluted that synopsis that you read off at the beginning is, Austin, when you watch it, it sweeps you up in its energy. You accept the rules, and the rules are simple enough that you don't get lost. It's not like sometimes I watch a movie like, I don't know, Inception, where it's like they have to stop every 10 or 15 minutes to explain more rules.
Yeah.
And a movie like that isn't overly complicated.
Yes.
But even so, when your script is built on this rule, now this rule, and then this rule is built on those rules, and there's this math to it that's constantly compounding, you do have to stop and make sure that the house of cards doesn't fall down. Whereas I never feel like this script is labored. I never feel like he's working overtime to try and hold everything together. I think the thing moves. It works. It may be weird, but it's definitely relatable.
And it's crazy. He doesn't explain the rules. Like, you don't understand why is this portal. Yeah, why is this portal attached?
You never see where they fall out of. It's just the top of the screen, and you're like, well, that's
But you know what? Like, message for Christopher Nolan, I guess. Like, it doesn't matter. He doesn't explain all the rules, and it's fine because it's a movie, and we don't have to have. Someone stopping to explain it to us every 10 minutes.
Because as soon as you try and stop and explain how this door in the wall of the little room goes into John Malkovich's head, that's when you fucking lose people, because they're like, oh, that's stupid. As soon as fantasy starts trying to become science fiction and edging, if you just let it be fantasy, then people will go with it.
There's a quote where somebody says that this isn't science fiction, this is fantasy, a neurotic fantasy, and I think that's exactly right. And I think that's why this film's convoluted storyline is successful. Is precisely because it doesn't kind of get bogged down in the details.
If you try to explain it, it falls apart.
Right, exactly. Okay, I want to read a quote from an interview with Kaufman, because this is kind of based on a theme of the film that I thought is interesting. Because the title of the film is Being John Malkovich. So the question is do these people who are all paying $200 a pop, and then even Schwartz, who becomes the master puppeteer, do they pay for the experience to be John Malkovich, or is there some sort of weird hybrid or some sort of synthesis? What's going on? Here's what Kaufman said. He said, well, you're inside someone else's skin, but Craig doesn't have the experience of being Malkovich. He has the experience of using Malkovich. He uses him to be with Maxine, and then he uses Malkovich's notoriety to get his own career going. So it's using John Malkovich. Yeah, I'd say it's using John Malkovich.
Well, I'm sure this is something that may be on your list to sort of explore, Austin, but the whole notion of the Cartesian self. Do you think this is an endorsement of Cartesian philosophy or rebuke of it?
Wow.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing is this quote is more an endorsement of it, because it's kind of implying that there's a sense, like an essence of Malkovich that is never distorted, right? You're only ever using Malkovich. But when I watched the film, the funny thing is I actually think it's different. When I watched the film, I do think that there is no real Malkovich when it's taken over. Not like there's no true Malkovich, right? Like, yeah, there's the moment when he kind of snaps out of it and he's like, I'm fucking paranoid. I heard this other thing in my head. But by the time that Cusack is doing the puppeteer dance with Malkovich's body, and by the time at that point, I think there's something much more synthetic going on. There's more of a hybrid going on. So the funny thing is that his quote totally seems to me to fly contradictory to how I interpret the film. You know?
In a way, and that's kind of what made me think of that when you brought that up, because when I watch it, having Malkovich's head as this, I mean, essentially it appears to be a tangible vessel for these transient egos to inhabit, like that flies directly in the face of what he's saying in that interview. But this is also the guy who, you know, when he won an Oscar, he took the stage and said, I don't want to take my time, I don't want to talk, I want to be gone, or whatever. He disappeared. So, like, there is this aspect of his personality, too, where I'm like, is that also part of it? I mean, he seems to have contempt for the whole, the show side of show business, or maybe the business side of show business. I mean, it may be difficult to draw the distinction, but I wouldn't put it past him because... Well, this is something I was going to bring up, that so often on this show, you guys will talk about movies within a philosophical framework, and that makes sense because I think all art can kind of be seen through a philosophical framework in the same way that it can be seen through a political framework. But it's, I think, fairly uncommon or infrequent for the filmmaker or the screenwriter to be aware of those frameworks when they're developing something. I think Charlie Kaufman is one of the rare filmmakers that is actually engaging with the dialectic in an intentional way. Sorry,
that's interesting. We love dogs. Come on, man. They're allowed on the show. No, this is interesting. So actually, Michael and I both had a supervisor at various points. Didn't last for the entire time, I don't think, but at various points, by the name of John Malarkey. Who he's actually changed his name now and he uses an Irish name, but I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm sorry if I'm being insensitive.
Malarkey wasn't Irish enough for him?
Well, he's like, it's like the real Irish saying. It's like my orca.
Malarkey's the one that the English colonists shoved on people as they destroyed their language. But let's not go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael is clearly of Irish descent, everybody.
Get back to John.
So John has written a lot on like the philosophy of film, and one of the things that he kind of does is he takes a different route. And he says, rather than looking at like how we can do a philosophy of film, he says that no, like film is a language in itself. Film is something of itself. Like, you shouldn't do a philosophy of film. You should just let the films kind of speak the language themselves. And if it results in some sort of philosophical motifs or concepts, that's a separate issue. And so this article that I actually just quoted that interview from by this guy named Daniel Shaw, it's behind a paywall, so that sucks. If you need it, you can contact us, and I'm sure I can figure out a way to get it to you. But it's called On Being Philosophical and Being John Malkovich. And one of the things that this author, Daniel Shaw, argues is that this is a film that is a philosophy. Like, it's not just simply espousing a philosophy. It is, in its own way, a type of philosophical language. And I think that that's kind of maybe the difference of somebody like Charlie Kaufman to maybe somebody like Nolan, where Nolan, we can do all kinds of analyses. Like, everybody loves to talk about the Joker and, political philosophy and stuff like that, or Batman and like, I don't know, the Batman Begins and how you have to like climb into the cave or whatever. That's The Return, whatever it is. You know what I'm talking, or The Rises. Sure. You know what I'm talking about, that there are themes that he's trying to represent through these characters. I don't quite see that's what Kaufman's doing. Rather, I think that he just is like exploring these really personal themes, but because he's such a philosophical thinker, they end up being projections of concepts. If that makes sense.
All right. Sure. Can I ask you all a question that I think relates to this then? And this might be overreaching or reading into stuff, but something that stood out to me was the difference in seeming motivation for people that wanted to be inside John Malkovich. That felt weird to say inside John Malkovich, but I said it. and it still feels weird, but it's part of the film. But like, so we have, you know, the Schwartzes, I guess, yeah, because Maxine never goes in. The Schwartzes go into Malkovich for experience, to be something else, to explore a part of themselves, to use their artistic skill. You know, for the Cusack character, he's a vessel for his own art. For the Cameron Diaz character, it's a way for her to explore male identity. But then the crew of like the old timers, like the extras from Cocoon that live in the mansion together, like their vibe seems to be just like, we don't want to die. So we jump into different host bodies for the simple perpetuation of life. So maybe that means nothing. Maybe I'm looking for rules in a world where there shouldn't be rules. Or maybe it's saying something about like experience. Because of course, I also think it's significant that you can be a Malkovich for 15 minutes. As like the general sort of thing. It's like this experiential thing. It's this taste of something.
Well, and it's 15 minutes. Is that getting your 15 minutes of fame?
I think it's something like that.
Oh,
15
sure.
minutes of being special, being important. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely like the lineup of people that are paying the $200 because it's John Malkovich and he's such an amazing actor. Like, part of that is I want to see what it's like to live as a celebrity. Part of it is I want to see what it's like to live as another person. And then the interesting thing is most of them have enjoyable experiences, right? Like, it's amazing, it's exhilarating to literally live as another person, be in another person's bodies. But then when Malkovich goes into his own portal and he comes face to face with his own self, what is it?
It's torture.
It's terrifying. Yeah. And it's just solipsistic. So I think there's an interesting almost tension there between all of these other people and their various desires to live as another person for whatever the reasons are. If it's just because they want to live forever, or if it's because they want to experience something that they can't experience from within their own like identity position in the case of Cameron Diaz, or within kind of like their failures because they haven't had the opportunities or whatever it is in the case of Cusack's character. And then that's kind of different, all of those motivations, compared to kind of what happens when Malkovich goes in. Right?
Yeah.
It's totally
Everybody
different.
has their reasons. I mean, the first guy is great where he comes in and goes, I want to be someone different. And they go, well, we can offer you a chance to be John Malkovich. He goes, well, that would be my second choice.
Yes. So good.
Such a ridiculous line.
So to talk about that guy then, right? Like, so that desire to leave my mundane life and experience something as a celebrity or someone different, like how much of that, and I'm not trying to do too much of a stretch here, how much of that is just like what social media has turned into, and what everything from reality TV to the way in which like there's celebrities who post every fucking thing they eat or when they shit on their Instagrams, like our ability to, like, we can be people in a level we couldn't. Like when this movie got made, celebrity was still a kind of like special, mysterious thing. And for the past 20 years, all we've done is chip away at that and make it like less special and less exclusive.
Who would you make this movie? Who would this be today if it were being blank blank? You know, there's no one that has that same kind of mystique.
Well,
and
isn't
celebrity and
Instagram
renown.
in a way, when you're using a Kardashian filter, aren't you being Kim Kardashian? Or when you're doing a pose that you saw some fitness guy do, aren't you being Matt Does Fitness? Like, isn't there a sense in which we're trying to kind of live through the eyes of these other individuals? But then here's the irony but it's all the same shit. So is it really actually engaging another person, or is it just that it's all kind of homogenized and we're all just kind of like participating in the same fantasies of whatever
but then
it is?
Is that what's interesting about seeing John Malkovich in this movie? That when we first see him, he's like eating toast, drinking coffee, reading the paper, and it's like, oh shit, I do those things. And then he like, well, you know what I mean? Like we just see him like being a normal person.
That hits on something specific, though, that kind of goes unmentioned, which is that John Cusack is the only person who ever gets to pilot the body, other than, you know, the old folks. But through the course of the movie, everyone who's visiting is just there watching. So that is even, like, there's something to that, too, where it's like, is it just this notion that I can relinquish control and I can just be a passive observer and not be concerned with, you know, what? I mean, you could make the argument that it's about escapism or celebrity culture in general and things like that. But it is one of those things to note that, like, the one person who does have control of the body ends up completely destroying himself, and everyone else just has a grand old time completely letting go of all free will and control.
Yeah, and I think the point you just made about the Cusack character is how much of, like, he sacrifices his life and his happiness for his quote-unquote art throughout the film.
Sure.
And ruins his life in pursuit of these sorts of things. Whereas
And
the
it
ones
totally
that kind of just like go in and go out. Yeah,
and it totally romanticizes the other too, because it's like it's the grass is greener sort of thing. Like, oh, we want to be somebody else. We want to be somebody else. But then Malkovich, when he goes into his own self, that's like just self-indulgence. Like, it's just, everything is him, and he's like, fuck, I don't want to be me. Like, get me the fuck out of me. Even Malkovich probably wants to be somebody else, right? And then, of course, when Lottie and Maxine go into the unconscious, then you're like, oh, really? You want to be this person who has all of these traumatic experiences? It's kind of like a very cynical take on that desire. The desire for escapism. It's seeing like, oh, you see these people, but fuck, man, we're all fucked up when you get down to the deep recesses of the unconscious and stuff like that. Do you really want to be these other people? And it doesn't really leave you with any solution. It's not like, you should just be true to yourself and be happy with yourself. It's none of that, but it's basically just kind of, problematizing the romanticizing of otherness,
Yeah. Well, while we kind of like wind into, actually, Raymond, go ahead, because I think I'm going to derail things.
Oh, okay. No, I was just going to say you hit on something interesting there, Austin. I think that even though everyone who's giving so much of themselves for this experience, and like I said, they're entering this head and relinquishing control, and to some degree, Malkovich also makes that bargain when he gets a call from a complete stranger and she says, meet me at this restaurant and I'll be there at this time. And like there is this, like you said, there's this yearning that he exhibits too for, he doesn't really know what it is, but it's going to be something different. And I think that you can say that across the board for everyone, as opposed to, except for maybe... You mentioned, Michael, that all the old folks seem to just want to live forever, except for John Cusack's boss, who I think just wants to be able to fuck in perpetuity. He's just solely driven by sex. And it's just like, it comes back to that notion of like, well, what makes immortality worthwhile if you don't have any desire left? Like, for Craig, his entire desire is to be with Maxine, and when he's denied that, he's denied it in the worst imaginable way. Whereas all these other people just want just the basest things. They, to experience the world through someone else's eyes, or to just fuck in perpetuity. And it's like, well, that guy seems to be having a grand old time at the age of 105.
Right. Well, let's leave that as the final note. You have one. Okay, quick point.
So dumb.
Quick point.
So dumb. This is going to take 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Okay, go.
It's crazy that Catherine Keener in this movie has a job where people pay her to go inside other people's minds, while in Get Out, she has a similar role in that family. That's all.
I was thinking about Get Out a little bit as I was watching this too. So
same here.
See, that took 20 seconds. We're all okay.
Appreciate you, man.
Malkovich is definitely in the sunken place in this movie.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on to the mailbag. Awesome. We've got some voicemails, or actually a voicemail this week, and then we'll have a couple emails. For those of you out there, if you want to engage with us, if you want to support Michael in like defending Charlie Kaufman, if you want to rag on Raymond, whatever, let us know.
Hold on.
And before we continue on to the mailbag, I want to give a shout out to our last sponsor of the night, HelloFresh. I don't know about you, but I love to cook. It feels better than eating out and usually tastes better. The problem is that preparation is always so time-consuming. I don't want to have to go to 3 grocery stores to grab everything I need, especially for specialty items. I end up with a sauce I won't be able to finish before expiration date, or buy a bunch of unique herbs in excess. Enter HelloFresh with their pre-measured and mouth-watering meals that are delivered right to your door. HelloFresh cuts out stressful meal planning and grocery store trips, so you can enjoy cooking and get dinner on the table in about 30 minutes or less. You can save 40% by using HelloFresh versus shopping at your local grocery store, too. When you order HelloFresh, you can find something for everyone, including low-calorie, vegetarian, and kid-friendly recipes, and you can change your preferences at any time. In fact, this past week, I made the Sichuan glazed pork meatballs, and it was so easy to make. Check out HelloFresh today by going to hellofresh.com/80Wisecrack and use code 80Wisecrack to get a total of $80 off across 5 boxes, including free shipping on your first box. So that's hellofresh.com/80Wisecrack and code 80Wisecrack for $80 off, 5 boxes, including free shipping on your first box. Now, back to the show. But you can call us at 1-213-534-8807. That's 1-213-534-8807. We've got a call from Robin this week.
Hi, Wisecrack. I hope you guys are coming back for the pandemic special. It's Rob in Los Angeles calling. Hey, I was thinking, the show is shock satire, right? But it just changed. If you think about it, past topics, they'll hit all kinds of controversial stuff. Randy Marsh using the N-word, but that doesn't affect me because I'm a white guy. Cartman not playing his CBAA players because I never played college sports. Butters taking on the entire Glee Club with guns because thankfully no horrible mass shootings have ever affected me. But the pandemic special does affect me. It affects us all so directly. Satire anymore. It's surreal satire. And it just makes this whole special too much to process. I really want to do the whole English class thing and, look at all the little major and minor flaws and the metaphors and the characters. But I can't. It's just too much. What I can do, though, is I can point out what the episode got right. The pandemic made Eric Cartman act altruistically for the first time ever. Seriously, has there ever been another time where Eric Cartman has done something altruistically? I kind of wish the episode had ended there, but, that wouldn't be South Park. Seeing President Garrison torch science with a literal flamethrower less than 24 hours after the most horrifying presidential debate in U.S. history, and I'm saying that as a former Republican voter, this is just too much. It's all too much.
First of all,
we'll all stand. Because we're pretending to be strong. We miss our lives. But we also want to be responsible and set a good example. We're confused. We're scared. We really feel like we need to set a good example because we live in a vacuum of leadership, and it just seems like all the crazy people are in charge. And if we're honest with ourselves, we're all on the verge of sobbing. Maybe we should.
Wow, that's real.
Won't make any difference, but maybe it'll make us feel better.
Whoa!
But President Garrison makes a good point. Please go vote. I know this isn't a politics podcast, and I know Biden...
Take it, Robin.
If you're thinking about sitting this one out, don't. Biden might not be the best guy in the world, but he is a useful fire extinguisher. So
all right.
Please.
Joy, let's end this one.
Enemy of the good here.
I love him.
Go cry.
I think that this podcast just got a fourth host. He's just going for it.
Oh, my God. Yeah, first of all, his voice is amazing. It is made for radio. Like, that guy should seriously
has to be
talking.
a voiceover actor. Has to. If he's not, someone snatch him up.
All right. Well, did you guys see the pandemic special?
Nope, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
I did.
And what do you think? Did Robin hit on anything interesting there?
Was it Robin or was it Rob in Los Angeles? I'm not sure. It
might be Rob in Los Angeles.
That's beside the point. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was bold. As Rob stated, or Robin, apologies. We're all going through this together right now, and what we are experiencing, whether or not we care to admit it, is trauma. And it can sometimes be tough to make art or comedy, especially out of trauma, because we may worry that it's a thin line or a delicate line to walk. I guess I really appreciate the voicemail, and I'm sure I can speak for all of us and say that I appreciate the listeners and when they add to the conversation in such a thoughtful way. But if I may, just to kind of tag what he was saying, South Park has handled a lot of things. They've confronted a lot of things, whether, like he said, it was racism in certain episodes, or school shootings in certain episodes, or the exploitation of student athletes in the episode about the NCAA. But I would kind of push back a little bit, Rob, and say that, like, whether or not those things endanger you directly, they do affect all of us. And just to tag your point, because I think it was a thoughtful voicemail, our work doesn't end with voting. Our work begins with voting. all of these things that South Park has satirized, and all of these things that the pandemic has brought to the surface, they were always there, and they were always there affecting the most vulnerable among us, even if they weren't affecting us directly. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to remember, yes, get out and vote, but that's where the work begins. It's not where the work ends. Take to the street, join protests if you're too scared to join protests, because it does get really scary out there. Donate to Black Lives Matter. Donate to bail funds in major cities around the country, where especially where police violence has been most pronounced against protesters. Take this opportunity because, and I don't mean to get on a soapbox here because, as Rob said, this isn't really a politics podcast, but all art is political. So in that sense, it is a political podcast. And I think when we're confronted with these kind of questions, we owe it to ourselves and the audience to be straightforward about it and to give full-throated support to the people who are on the ground doing the work every day, every year, and who aren't just checking a box every 2 or 4 years.
Yeah,
definitely. I know.
Important stuff. I think we have to get through some more.
That's all I have to say. And I do appreciate the voicemail. I don't want him to feel attacked. I just injustice for one is injustice for all. So let's pull together and build something better after this pandemic.
See, it's always tough to transition now from serious shit to segue to something else, but I'm going to do a really tactless transition now and read something from the mailbag from Braden. Again, if you want to email us, you can email us movies@wisecrack.co. That's movies@wisecrack.co. So Braden says, "Hey, Wisecrack 2, long-time listener here. I wanted to make a comment about I'm thinking of ending things. I enjoyed the movie, but felt that a lot of the references were fairly niche. I have a background in musical theater and was actually in a high school production of Oklahoma. I thought I could provide some context specifically about the dance ballet scene. I hesitate to call this scene an homage to the musical because it really is an exact reproduction of the ballet sequence at the close of the first act of Oklahoma, but the ballet portrays a dream that the female is having in which she marries the hero but is later kidnapped by the villain. The hero and the villain fight, and the hero ultimately kills the villain. This is exactly what happens in Ending Things, with Jesse Plemons' stand-in playing the hero and the janitor's stand-in playing the villain. What's interesting here is that Jake and the janitor are ultimately the same character, so in the janitor's dream/fantasy, he's viewing himself simultaneously as both the hero and the villain battling over a woman's affection. And this ties in nicely to this award ceremony scene, etc., etc. But what do you guys think? Is there something interesting in the fact that this is an intentional retread of Oklahoma? I know, Michael, you were the defender of the film, whereas the other two were not. So what do you think? Does this add anything to it to know that this is the intention here?
I mean, I'll just say I think it's interesting that we know that this actual janitor, and Raymond's read the book and I haven't, so I'll be quick, and I'm sure he has a better thought here. Not to put too much pressure on you, but I think that we know this janitor is at this school hearing these kids rehearse Oklahoma over and over, that it creates a framework in his brain by which he makes sense of all this stuff. I find interesting and kind of fun, and in the way they kind of tie together both Oklahoma and A Beautiful Mind in that final auditorium scene, I just really got a kick out of as well. But I didn't realize it was A Beautiful Mind speech the first time I saw it, and it was fun to rewatch it after learning that. Yeah.
And you could even make the argument that not only is he the hero and the villain, but he is also the damsel in distress.
He's everything.
It's a really... I will say I'm sure that most folks could probably surmise that the ballet sequence was not in the book, but it is one of those very Kaufman-esque things where he doesn't limit himself with regards to the colors that he's willing to paint with. When he opens up a canvas, he'll throw whatever works at it, whether it's a musical sequence or ballet or puppetry. He's such a weird, truly weird guy, but I think there is something truly transcendent about bodies in motion, and it kind of relates to being John Malkovich, because you see Craig making the puppet dance early on in a way that that cut from the puppet after the dance up to John Cusack sipping a beer and looking haggard and disheveled and unwashed. It is something that you're like, wow, there really is beauty inside this person, and he does feel constrained by his body or his personality or his station in life, but he definitely has something wonderful to express. And he gets in his own way. And
Indeed.
I think you could maybe say the same thing about I'm thinking of ending things.
Indeed, Charlie Kaufman has a mind that needs to explore itself further and further, and I look forward to probably indulging in that in the future. Again,
Yes.
everybody, if you want to reach out to us, you can call us 1-213-534-8807, or you can email us, movies@wisecrack.co, not com.co. And if you guys want to participate in future patron polls where you can choose an episode topic like we did this week, you can go to patreon.com/wisecrack or click the link in the show notes. Y'all, I think that's it. Is there anything else we got to say before we head out? Anybody? I don't know where you are in the world, everybody, but like...
Well, I'll say this for anyone who's in, I can only speak to North American Netflix. If you've never seen it and you want to, it's on Netflix right now, so you can stream it.
Oh, yeah.
And where can we find you guys on the internet?
Go ahead, Michael.
Raymond, you go first. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You guys are both so polite. I'll go. No, I'm kidding. Raymond, go ahead.
MySpace.com/... No, I'll be Michael O. Burns on Twitter and Instagram. That's where you can find me. If you do find me, don't be a dick.
For me, it's http://www.twitter.com/crematoria, CREAMATORIA. You can find me there. And also, real quick, I want to plug a new podcast that it's a new movie podcast that's been going for the last 2 months now, called When Cinephiles Attack. They just did an episode on their top 20 of the past decade, so it's a great time to jump in. And I will just say, it's not the list that I would make, but it is unlike any other list of top 20 movies on the internet. I highly recommend it. And the way that they go about picking their movies for the list, as you may surmise by the title, When Cinephiles Attack, is just so brutal and funny, and they really go after each other. So that's hosted by some friends of mine, and I wanted to recommend it to the listeners.
Sick.
Austin, where can people find you when they want to find you?
Just fucking Google my shit. My name's Austin Hayden Smith.
Wow,
You'll
he's so
find me.
confident that you'll find him.
Google
Just
it.
Google
Whatever.
him. It'll
Yeah,
autocomplete.
whatever.
Type in the letter A, and it'll finish his name.
See you guys. We love you. Peace.
Yeah, great show. Great show.